For me, usually it's about what I saw versus what I expected and prompting, in a way, a change in narratives of my own narrative and my own potential biases. And in general, what I found is the countries that are considered oftentimes the most unknown and dangerous turned out to be the best experiences, mostly because my expectations were different from what I saw in person. And so for my two best experiences were Iraq and Syria.
Welcome back. This is Andreea Parc,
And Alexa Dumitru.
and this is a Live Again podcast where attorneys and other professionals meet to discuss real life challenges and how our decisions shaped our journeys. Today we have with us Mr. Barry Hoffner. He is a world traveler, and we cannot wait to hear the conversation and his journey around the world. Thank you, Barry, so much for being here with us today. Such a pleasure to have you.
Hey, both of you, for inviting me. I'm really excited to have this discussion today.
Of course. I read a little bit about yourself. I would like to mention that your cousin is part of the publishing company where I published my book, my first book, The Three Tomatoes. And she was very nice to refer you to our podcast. So yeah, I'm taking this opportunity to thank Rita for connecting us.
It is one of my very favorite cousins. She was actually the first cousin of my mother, who passed away at 104 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
Sorry to hear that.
sorry to hear that, but that is an amazing age.
Definitely. Thank you.
Let's start from the beginning. So you've traveled in every country in this world except one. And I would like to ask you, how did you get to do that?
Sure. So if I start back, I took a trip when I was 18 years old to Europe after graduating from high school. I actually wanted to go to Hawaii, and my best friend wanted to go to Europe, and we flipped a coin, and he won. So I would say that coin flip changed my life. It brought out a whole new world to me that I really didn't know existed. And so every chance I had the opportunity to travel, I took it, and ended up in my career in finance, spending most of it, almost 20 years overseas, living in different countries and doing a bit of traveling along the way. And even I took a mid-career sabbatical with my late wife, Jackie, and it was supposed to be 6 months traveling through Asia and living in China. And it ended up being about 2 years where we traveled through Africa, et cetera. And then we came back to California to raise our children. And once they reached their college years, our empty nesting years, we were looking forward to a life of more travel together. I lost my late wife in 2017. And that prompted, after a period of darkness, a desire to continue on with what we had thought about doing, which was traveling. At one point in time, I met somebody who had been to every country in the world, which I didn't even know that people do. I didn't even know it was possible. Then I had a flash of insight. This was during COVID, and that I would make my travel more intentional. And I decided to travel at that point to every country in the world.
That's a beautiful story.
So at the point in time when you started to travel intentionally, how many countries have you visited? And after that, how many countries?
Yeah, good question. So after that phone call with that young Spanish person who actually plays a prominent role in my book, Alvaro from Madrid, I honestly didn't even know that there were 193 UN voting member countries. At that point, when I made that decision, I added up all my countries for the first time. I knew I had traveled a lot, but I didn't know to how many. And I realized I had been to 121 countries, which meant that I had 72 to go. I kind of gave myself a deadline before my 65th birthday. I turned 65 this year. So in 3 years, I traveled to 72 new countries, which entailed going to about 100 countries during those 3 years of continuous travel. I basically spent over 200 days a year traveling each of those years.
So you would go from country to country, or you would go somewhere and then come back and go to a different country?
Yeah, it's a good question. Due to my mother being over 100 and living near me, I felt bad about being gone for long periods of time. So my goal was to try to get back home ever so often. So usually I would travel for about 3 weeks a month at a time, do 3 countries, trying to group them together in certain parts of the world. And then I'd come home for a week or 10 days and then head back out. I know this entails a lot of environmental usage of energy, and so I ended up purchasing 65 tons of carbon credits to offset my travels. But I do have travel friends who they go for 6 months at a time, go to as many countries as they can, and then come back. I did it a different way.
And what do you do in these countries? Because in a few days, you can't see the whole country. How do you pick and choose what you want to see in every country?
I mean, I've lived years in different countries, and I know I agree with you. Sometimes it takes a long period of time to really know the country, but because I had decided I wanted to try to do this in 3 years, my goal being to try to get to know as much about I can about that country in that period of time allocated. For a country big and diverse, I would allocate between a week and 10 days. And for a very small country, I would allocate 2 or 3 days. But those 3 days were very intensive. And usually what I would do is I would hire a local guide in those countries who was very much vetted by very accomplished travelers. And we would agree on an itinerary that not just included visiting places, but meeting people, having experiences. And yeah, I mean, of course, I left the country not fully knowing everything about it, but knowing as much as I could in that time allotted. And I would usually spend a week or so doing research on those countries and reading about them, and often reading a book that took place in that country.
And out of all the countries that you visited, which one was that had more impact on your healing journey?
Yeah, I love that question. Usually people ask me what's my favorite country, which is really hard. For me, it's about the impact and the experience. And usually it's about what I saw versus what I expected, and prompting in a way a change in narratives of my own narrative and my own potential biases. And in general, what I found is the countries that are considered oftentimes the most unknown and dangerous turned out to be the best experiences, mostly because my expectations were different from what I saw in person. And so for my two best experiences were Iraq and Syria. Iraq, because as you probably know from Rita, our family's heritage is from Baghdad. We're Iraqi Jews. My late mom, came to the US when she was 7 years old in the 1920s. And so I always dreamed of going to Iraq. It was always my mom's first language was Arabic. She spoke with her mom in Arabic. And it was a dream of mine to go to Iraq, but kind of like a dream that you never expect to fulfill. It's kind of like one day I'll go to the moon. My cousin and I used to say, one day we'll go to Baghdad. But for us, it was like one day we'll go to the moon. So when I had the opportunity to go there, and not just go there, but retrace a little bit of my mom's Iraqi Jewish roots, and find as a Jew that I was as accepted by Muslims who I was in a way brought up to fear, that changed a lot for me. And that impression stayed with me. And when I ended up going to Syria, which was not only a Muslim country, but a Muslim country that had been pretty much shut out by the world, and not just the Western world, but including by the Arab League for 10 years. That was really an intense experience to see a place that was pretty much destroyed. The media reports on Syria as if it's only was Assad, who was a war criminal in many people's opinion, including mine, and the refugees who made their way to a better place, but not the actual people who continued to live there because that was their home, and what they suffered and what their life was like and what their hopes were, what their dreams were. Real people there that went pretty much unreported. And that became my story. And I left feeling really a deep love for Syrian people and what they experienced and who they are and what their hopes are and how they treated me. I celebrated my 63rd birthday in Damascus. My guide threw me a surprise birthday party with 50 Syrians who I didn't know except for my guide. And it was one of the best experiences I had in my life, to be honest.
Wow. My father's sister and my uncle were the Romanian economic councils in Damascus, Syria for 8 years back in the days. So when I
Yeah.
was a kid. And I remember they were telling us how friendly the Syrians are. And every time they would come back to visit to Romania, they would bring all kinds of sweets. And even to this day, the best sweets that I've ever had were the Syrian sweets with pistachios and how is it called? The little something like baklava, but
Okay.
it's with pistachios.
Okay.
And everywhere I go, I get those sweets, remembering the Syrian sweets that my aunt uncle brought from Syria. So I've never been there, but I can relate to what you're saying.
Well, I love what you just said because that brings up a lot for me. My last day in Baghdad, my guide said, I have a surprise for you. He took me by a famous sweet store and bought a big box of sweets to take back to my mom to say, I hope she comes back to return. But in Damascus itself, my first day walking, we walked by this little stand that was selling, it was like a little bird's nest. Inside was honey and pistachios. And still today,
That's the one.
it's the best thing I've ever eaten.
Yes.
I still say that today.
Yeah, that's the one. So you've been to Syria, and excuse my ignorance, why not Korea? Because that's the only country you mentioned that you haven't been to.
Well, there's a good possibility I will be going there very soon, but I got a little surprise 2 weeks ago. So North Korea has been closed to the world for tourism since COVID. There only been a few small groups of Russian tourists because Russia and North Korea are very close. They also opened up for a marathon 2 months ago, an international marathon, which I was invited to, but I didn't have the opportunity to go. I couldn't fit it into my schedule. And I'm hoping within the next month to be able to tell you that I've completed my 193rd country.
So, again, forgive my ignorance now. All of these stories of like Americans getting kidnapped and being kept in jail somewhere in Syria or North Korea, or you've heard all these stories. Doesn't that scare you? Or didn't that scare you at the time?
I mean, I love that question. I guess what I would say the main thing I've learned is oftentimes fear is in our minds. And I also find in my life, and particularly in my travels the last 3 years, is when you push the borders of comfort, some of the best things in your life happen. And from this journey, I can say that, like, honestly, the places considered the most dangerous, I've had really the most intense experiences. I was in Sudan last year in the midst of a civil war and connecting with people, and I'll never forget that. And the other thing is making the decision to go to every country in the world. I went to places that I would have never gone to if I didn't have that numerical goal. And oftentimes those produce connections or experiences that I would have never had. So I feel like my life is richer. But the last thing I'll say is, and what I've learned is, the world is way less dangerous than our leaders and media show us. Sure, these places are objectively dangerous and more dangerous than I live. No question about that. But again, like, I feel like if we just live our lives under protecting ourselves, we're missing opportunities to have really fulfilling experiences and rewire our brains in a way. And that's what I feel like I've done. Like when I think about places that I've gone 5 years ago, if you would have told me about that, it would have conjured up fear in my mind. But now when I think of Syria, I don't think of bombs. I think of people that I met. Even when I think of Afghanistan, and in Afghanistan, I probably went through 50 Taliban checkpoints without one single incident. I think about the people I met in Afghanistan. So, and that for me, like, makes the world smaller. It makes it more beautiful. And that's why I titled my book, Belonging to the World. And as I say in my book, I wish I had stories to tell of harrowing escapes, but I really don't. Maybe I'm just lucky, but maybe there's also something to the idea that the world is safer than our media and our leaders want us to think it is.
Yeah. I always thought that we live our lives by our beliefs. So if we believe that the world is dangerous, that the people are there to hurt me, that's exactly what's going to happen. But if we're open and every single person in Afghanistan or Syria or North Korea is just a simple human being like we are, then we're all friends and we're all part of this wonderful world.
And that is exactly what my book's about. It's about the people that I've met along the way and the far corners of the earth. It's not, of course, I write about my travels, but most of all, I write about people. And with the idea of hopefully showing readers that the world is a much better place than it's often portrayed.
It's unfortunate we were talking the other day that people are looking for, because with this podcast that we're doing now, it's alive again, and we're showing people that there is life after loss, there is life after prison and after death in the family. Um, but unfortunately, podcasts and episodes about bad things that happen in life sell the most. So people are not ready to hear the good things in life and the positive things of experiences of life.
Yeah, I appreciate talking to you today because when you turn into the media, it's an evolutionary trait wired in our brains to be fearful. It goes back thousands of years. And honestly, we have to work at overriding that. And when we override that and we have experiences that unexpectedly positive of things that we were fearful of before, I think it creates an evolution for us. And I think that our brains need to evolve. Unfortunately, what we see today with a lot of social media and a lot of media generally, it takes us to more fearful places.
I mean, we had this conversation a few months back. My mom told me, she goes, for my birthday, I'm going to be in Bali. And I go, what? Excuse me? Where are you going? And she goes, yeah, I'm going to be in Bali. I go, with who? She goes, alone. I'm like, no, you're not. No, you're not. And I had this, exactly like what you were talking about, this fear of you're a woman by yourself in a place that you have absolutely no idea about because we've never been to Asia at all. You have absolutely no idea. I mean, how are you going to go by yourself? You can barely navigate the train system here. What makes you think you can navigate Bali by yourself? And I had that moment of fear telling her, no.
You can see how trustworthy I am in front of my daughter.
Usually it's the opposite. It's usually the mother saying that to the daughter. I have two quick stories. I remember early on in my journey, I had the opportunity to go to Afghanistan. And when I first saw that, this was less than a year after the Taliban took over, I said, I can't do that. But then I set myself a goal to see every country in the world, and Afghanistan's a country. So I just said yes. And I remember getting on the plane from Dubai, flying into Kabul, really asking myself, maybe I'm taking this thing a little too far. But I could feel myself after an amazing trip. I spent 8 days traveling to 3 different places in Afghanistan. I felt my brain expand and myself grow and my fears diminish. And that was the start of realizing I really can go almost anywhere and I can find a way to make it a positive experience. And the other story I wanted to tell you is along the way, I've met a group of travelers doing the same thing I'm doing. We keep in touch a lot of times through Instagram about getting advice on, okay, how do you get a visa for this country? Or do you recommend a guide for that country? And there was this American woman in her late 30s now. She'd been in a wheelchair since the age of 7. And her mother taught her never to fear being in a wheelchair, that she has a challenge, physical challenge, but everybody has some challenge in their life. And she grew up without fear. And after a career in corporate America that she got burned out at, she decided she wanted to see the world. And she traveled many countries by herself in a wheelchair. I met her coincidentally in a South Pacific island, and we spent a couple days traveling together. And it's just very impressive. And she's just living her life and enjoying it and overcoming her challenges. For most of us, we wouldn't even think of doing something like that, but it's expanded her life. It's made her life richer.
Yeah.
So, India, let's go to Bali.
Yeah, thank you.
Decision made. I'm glad to be a part of
Thank
it.
Yes, thank you so much for convincing her to let me go. So, you mentioned that you took the decision to travel so you can heal. How do you feel now?
So if I go back to when I lost my wife, that was back the end of 2017. I moved away from where I live to Washington, D.C. to live with my son who had just started college. He didn't want to live in the dorms anymore. And so that was a period of what I call like intensive grief. And I started to climb out of that grief about 8 months later by taking a trip. But then the healing journey really began a few years later. And honestly, the start of that was really just what I would call escape. I just didn't want to be back at a house full of memories without my wife, without my sons. But then as I started to travel, I realized it was changing me. It was giving me a view for living again, as opposed to just getting by and doing what I needed to do. And so I just kept going. And then I fell into this sort of intentional goal of going to every country in the world. And sort of like once you have a goal, you have a fixed idea and you just keep going. So when I look back now, I would say I have healed the loss of my wife. And though I think about her every day, and it's been 8 years, I feel like I've charted a course towards new beginnings that I'm not sure would have been possible had I not been on this journey.
So, tell us more about your book.
Belonging to the World traces a journey from the initial love of travel to loss and then to finding renewed purpose again through a goal of going to every country in the world. But it wasn't the numerical goal of 193 countries in the end that mattered. It was the changing of narratives, the seeing of the beauty of this world and the people, and making me feel like a belonging to something more than home, but belonging to a place that doesn't have boundaries. And so now, like, when I hear a country, I have a vision for it of people that I've met along the way. And it just makes it feel small. It's not someplace over there. Of course, like a lot of the problems with our world right now is what we call like otherism. They're the other. So for me, like almost no place is the other now. And that's a really strong feeling. And along the way, I neglected to mention, I have a foundation that does work in West Africa. And we, about 7 years ago, after the loss of my wife, we started focusing on providing scholarships and opportunities for young women in West Africa to have an education. And it's named after my late wife, Jackie. It's called the Bourse Jackie, the Jackie Scholarship. And during my travels, that has expanded. We started first in one country, and now we've expanded into 14 other countries. So in a way, the travel also itself has helped honor my late wife and helped me like feel a sense of belonging to people that we support.
That's wonderful.
And I should mention that all proceeds for my book will be donated to scholarships for, under my wife's name, Bourse Jackie.
What better way to honor somebody than to push it along to everybody else and to give back to everybody else? That's really beautiful.
Yeah, what I love to see is, so had a sunflower tattoo on her shoulder, which she was truly always turned towards the sun. She was light and energy and kindness. And so all the young women, when they first get their scholarships, we give them a shirt that says Bourse Jackie with the big sunflower. And when I see that, it just gives me a feeling like somehow she's there and she's smiling in some way.
Of course she is.
And at one point along the way, I decided to get a tattoo on my back, which is a globe of the world with a sunflower wrapped around the edges of the globe.
I have so many questions for you. Your story is so touching. It's absolutely incredible. If you would pick one country in the world, where would you live?
Well, I honestly love where I live. If you ask me my favorite country, it's always been Italy and it will always be Italy. I love the food. I love the people. I love the sights. I love the way they live life. So if I had to live in a different place than where I live right now, it would probably be Italy.
So right now in California.
I live in Northern California in a town called Sausalito, which is just over the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco.
That's one place where we've been.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, we
And
can
what did you
say
think?
that.
That one we know. It was
And what do you
very
think of it?
beautiful. We wanted to go visit Alcatraz, but at the time I was too young and they still had an age limit.
Oh,
That was
wow.
one
Okay.
thing I really want to go back and see.
Okay. Well, welcome. Please come.
Thank you.
Yes, yes, yes. We will definitely put it in our schedules. Is there anything that you would like to touch upon that we haven't?
Yeah, I guess what I would say is like, I don't think it's a coincidence that along my journey, I met a lot of people. I have specific stories of loss that we just found each other somehow and connected and bonded. And honestly, all over the world. The best story is, so there's a country in the north of South America, the northeast corner of South America. It's a very small country. Many people have never heard of it, called Suriname. And I was on a trip to Suriname and Guyana. And of course, when I plan my trips, I always look at visa requirements. And for Suriname, it said you can get a visa on arrival, meaning you arrive at the airport, they give you a visa. So I arrived on January 10th, 2020, in a small airport, very few number of passengers, mostly business types. And there was a visa on arrival desk that I waited in front of. And when nobody showed up, I went to the immigration officer and he said, well, we changed our policy on January 1. You now need a visa to come to our country. So they took me in a back room, went through my luggage and told me I would be deported. And I was planning to have a jungle walk they have one of the biggest jungles in the world. 93% of the country is jungle. Normally I like to stay at a small sort of bed and breakfast, but this time I had booked a Marriott to use my points. So I texted, the authorities put me in a small room. They took my passport. It was late at night. They said, you'll be on the first plane out of here to Miami, even though I was supposed to fly to Guyana. And they would give me back my passport in the morning. Before I went to sleep on the bench, there was no one in the passenger lounge because they only have a few flights in and out. I texted the concierge at the Marriott in the capital, which is Paramaribo, Suriname, to tell her to cancel my jungle tour. She texted me back, well, let me see what I can do. And I thought, what can she do? So I went to sleep. A few hours later, it was probably about 10:30 or 11. I felt a tap on me. It was the same immigration officer, and I didn't know what to expect. He said, follow me. And as we were walking across the runway back to the immigration office, he said, you're lucky. So this woman had contacted the Secretary of State of her country to get me a visa because the Marriott is a very important place for the country and the Secretary of State used to dine there a lot, I guess. This woman had waited up for me to arrive at the hotel. And I said I wanted to thank her. And I said, can I buy you a drink? And we were having a drink. And she was telling me her story that she had been living in the Netherlands, lost her husband. And then after that loss, moved back with her 3 children to Suriname and met a man and got married and fell in love and got married again, and kind of telling me that there is sort of renewed life after loss. And honestly, those kind of stories I have all over the world. Sometimes we just find each other.
That's a perfect, that was such a stars aligning moment.
And if you read my book, you'll see a few of those along the way.
When is your book coming out?
So the book itself will not be published until early February. We're actually going to reveal the cover in the next week or so on our social media platforms. The actual book itself, they call it the Advanced Reader Copy, the ARC, will be Available end of October. I'm reaching out now to people for praise quotes. I'm not going to launch until February because sort of Jackie and my anniversary is on Valentine's Day, or we got married on Valentine's Day. So the idea is to launch on that week.
We'll mark it in our calendars.
Yes.
Thank you.
Cannot wait to get the book. And now that we're approaching the end, there is one question that I ask every guest, and that is, what is one activity in your life that makes you feel more alive?
Well, for me, it's pretty clear. I like travel because it forces me to look at things in a different way. It hits an expansiveness in my brain that really nothing else does. I mean, things do, but to the extent like seeing something really different and trying to absorb it in my brain and understand it and add it to the expansiveness of my mind there's for me nothing like it. So that's what it would have to be.
Now that you mentioned that, I have a question. How do you deal with jet lag?
I mean, I'm just really lucky. People ask me that all the time. And I honestly rarely have jet lag, maybe because I've traveled so much. People ask me how I stay healthy, and maybe because I've been exposed to so many different bacteria in such a concentrated period of time, my immune system is strengthened. I guess I try not to arrive at a place early in the morning if I can. That makes it much harder. The first night's sleep is usually really important. So it's important to be tired before you go to sleep. And honestly, I don't have a cure for it. I do take melatonin, but I just don't have a problem with jet lag. And for me, usually it's all in the return because on the way there, I'm so excited about the place that my natural body rhythms are already alive and activated. So,
Yeah, because I noticed that when we go to a new place, I get the excitement, but we go back to Romania a lot, and the first 3 days to a week, we don't do anything. We can.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
coming back, the same. And
Yeah.
Romania, it's only 7 hours difference. I mean,
Yeah.
how would you feel?
To Australia.
Right, and a difference that's bigger.
Yeah, you just get used to it. It's part of the journey in a way. You just prepare for it. I've had multiple 30-hour plus trips back from Africa. A lot of places in Africa, there's no direct flights. So oftentimes you're flying 2, 3, 4 flights to get back home. But I've just adjusted to it. I don't really have any secret.
That's
the best secret.
that's the best secret.
I have another question. How do you deal with the food? Because I'm always so scared of like food poisoning and things like that. And we watch this guy on YouTube called Best Ever Food Show, and he
Yeah.
goes all over the world to eat. How do you deal with the food?
You know, I used to watch Anthony Bourdain, and I'm just not that person at all. So when we go to places where I really understand, I know the food, I like it, like Syria, Lebanon, places like that, Japan, I'm good. But in other places, I'm just careful because, of course, like food is part of a culture of a country, but I also don't want to ruin my trip by getting sick. So I'm just careful. I don't, I know some people are a little bit more adventurous than I am, but I don't eat, I try not to eat street food and try to be sanitary. And not that there's anything wrong with their food or anything, but it's just, I just don't want to risk a trip. That's it.
Yeah.
If I'm living in a place for a period of time, of course, like I'd get adjusted to their food. But when you're in a country for 5 or 6 days, I just don't want to take the risk. So.
That's good to know.
Yeah. Little things like I don't eat a ton of meat or chicken. I won't have fish if I'm not near a coast, for example, or things that are easy to make that are healthy for you, like eggs or cooked vegetables or something like that, where you're getting some nutrition.
Yeah. And probably not too much of their spices.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't mind spice, but I try to be careful. I try to have a balance between wanting to sample some local stuff, which I have before, but also not risking a bad trip from getting food poisoning, which I only got once. And I'll just tell you the quick, funny story about it. It was in Afghanistan because I didn't want to eat the goat kebabs that my travel companions were eating every night. So I was just ordering rice and the bread, and I got sick of that after a while. We went to a place where they had pizza. I was like, pizza in Afghanistan? Yeah, sure. So I ordered the pizza, and I got sick from that. It was probably from the cheese. So
Cheese is one of those things where If you're not used to it, it can turn over your stomach real fast.
Particularly if it's not well preserved. So,
And not pasteurized. I have that issue
Yeah.
in Romania.
yeah.
Yeah. So, well, next time try the goat kebab.
There you go. There you go. Okay. Great.
Die.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I do hope to have a reading somewhere in New York. I hope to meet you both.
Please reach out.
Thank you.
Also, I will link your information to the podcast so people can read about you and your extraordinary journey.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Our listeners, thank you for listening. And for more guests and conversations, please subscribe and follow us. We'll see you next week.